Yeah, that's where we at, man. Folks, I want to tell you something. We're back live a little bit after 7 here. It's been a minute, and I'm excited, probably even more from the first episode, because I got my main man Billy Ferguson back with me tonight for a Thursday session on leadership, business leadership, and lessons learned. And man, it's been some time. My kid's schedule has gotten in the way of mine and Billy's recording, but he's been running for office as well. And we are on the backside of the election. And my man Billy here has got some reports. The election didn't go his way. Let's go ahead and put that out there in front. But I'm going to tell you something. This is old Jeffro at 10:30 at night. Someone texted me, and they were like, "Billy's got a strong showing," because they I can't remember who was texting me, because I had texted someone that what you had told me, and you were like, "Hey, I feel like I'm gonna have a decent run," and your confidence. And I was like, "Man, this is." So they messaged me like, "Hey, Billy's not doing bad," and I logged in at 10:30 at night, run it WSLS. You were down by 5. When I looked, and I was like, "Holy crap, man!" At 10:30 at night, you were down by 5, and here we are. But I've never had anyone on my show that has we've talked about that has ran for political office, and I'm excited to hear about your experiences, man. Because here's what I'm going to tee you up, and I want to tell you about a story. A fellow from Virginia Beach was telling me he had ran for like a state delegate spot. And this guy's one of these dudes in his community. He was like, "I am friends with everybody." He said, until I turned in my stuff to run for office. And he said, some of my closest friends absolutely left tracks on my back. He's like, I never realized how the political game would change my life and my friendships and all these things that I had. And that was what he had told me a couple years ago when I was talking to him. So man, welcome back to the show. Take it away, man. Tell us what's been going on in your world.
Oh man, glad to be back. And you're right. If you want to find out who your friends are, who your enemies are, decide to run for an office. I don't know if it's the school board and everything like that, but I can speak for in my county and for the board of supervisors. You'll find out real quick who your friends are and not. But I took that as a positive because I had people that I thought would have stuck by me through thick and thin, and they threw me under the bus, pulled over, and backed up. But then I had the other side. I had people that, I didn't think would have given me the time of day, and they're mailing me $50
Yeah.
to run and support you. So it worked out good. It was a great experience. Tough. It's tough, Jeff. There's so much more into it than I really realized.
Like what, Billy?
I'm
Yeah, like
sorry.
what? Like what?
So to run, you have to get 150 signatures of registered voters in your district, which is pretty simple because you just go out and knock on door and somebody signs their name, and they can sign their name to as many petitions they want. They don't have to vote for you. I had one young lady that I knocked on the door, and she came to the door, and I explained what I was doing, and she said, "Well, young man, I'll sign your petition, but I'm going to vote for your opponent." I said, "Well, that's okay." I said, all you're signing for is for me to get on the ballot. And you can sign my petition, his petition, somebody else's. You can sign as many petitions as you want.
Yeah.
But I says, if you sign mine and I get on the ballot, now you got two super people to vote for. And that's tough. Lots of reporting stuff. So let me back up. So you get your name on the ballot, takes 150 names. And then you get on the ballot. And then you have to do this thing called a statement of organization. And you have to create a name. And I don't know if you've ever looked at these signs stuff. It always says authorized and paid for by.
Yep.
So that's what that is. So mine was Ferguson for supervisor. And you can name it anything. I could have called it Friends of Jeff Robertson if I'd have wanted to. But then you have to go get a bank account. You have to get an EIN number set up, just like you're setting up a company. You have to get that set up. And then you have to put money in this account. You can put $5, you can put 50,000. Now, here's the key thing about that. Whatever you put in stays in unless you spend it on the campaign. So if you end the campaign and you've got $5,000 left in that account, you can't never get that money back out. Now, you can keep it there if you want to run again, and you can use that money to run again, or you can give that money to another candidate, but you personally can't get that money back out. I didn't learn that till the day I was setting up my account because I was initially going to set it up for $2,500. And they was explaining to me like, that's great, but you can't get this money back out. And if you're going to
Right.
spend that, so I only put $100 in mine. And remind me to come back to this because I tell you where I got my hand spanked a little bit by the Department of Elections later on. So you get that set up, and you only have to have two officers. You have to have a candidate, you have to have a treasurer. So got all that set up, and once you get that, then they check your names, and I said 150. I'm sorry, Jeff, it's 125 you have to have. So a lot of people will sign it just to sign it. And
Yeah.
remember, they have to be in your district, and they have to be a registered voter. So if you get 125 names, I had over 200 names. And when it got all checked, I had like 3 spares. I think you're required to have 125, and I had like 128 because
Yeah.
there's so many on there. I don't know what district they live in. And the way the districts are set up, it's really hard because a lot of times people say, I live here. Am I in your district? Well, I don't know. Because they give you a big map, but you may live at 123 Main Street, and I live at 124 Main Street. Well, that was a cutoff. And the map they send you just says Main Street. So depending on where you live on Main Street, I know you're familiar with Franklin County. Ruritan Road was a perfect example. Part of Ruritan Road was in my district. The other part wasn't. If you went 220 South and you left Rocky Mount and you lived on the right side of 220 South, my district went all the way to 619 Minute Market. If you lived on the left, it stopped at Doe Run Road. So it's all that. So you have to learn all that. Well, then you got to start knocking on doors. You got to start talking to people. You got to appear at events. And then like every 3 or 4 weeks, you have to turn these reports in. And here's where I got my hand spanked at, and I still haven't got it all corrected yet. So people's giving me money. I had donations that range from $5 to $2,000 that people would give me. So I was putting all that in the bank account like I was supposed to. But like if I went out and I needed to buy some signs and I didn't have money in my account to pay for those signs, I just took my own debit card and paid for it, which you're not supposed to do. I found out later you can use your own money, but the way it's supposed to be done, and it's not illegal, it just adds a lot of more paperwork. What I was supposed to have done was taken my own personal money and put it in that Ferguson supervisor political account and then spend it out of that account because it makes it a lot easier for record keeping. Because what happens now if somebody calls, because that's public information. So if you want to know who all gave me money, you can go on Department of Elections and find out who gave me money, where I spent that money at, and all. So the thing comes up is if you say, well, who bought your signs? Well, I bought them. Well, show me where you bought them. And right now, without this district paperwork, I couldn't show you. So what I had to do is go back to my bank account, show where I paid for these signs, send receipts where I paid for them. So there's a lot of the paperwork done. Then just working the election day is a tiring day. I mean, we started at 4:30 and we didn't finish till almost midnight. And you were on your feet the whole time. Rocky Mount had 3 precincts. So I had to go from precinct to precinct. I had like 12 poll workers helping me. You can only get within so close of the precinct and just learning all this stuff. And the other thing is, Jeff, it's expensive.
Yeah.
I had a guy tell me if you're going to run for a state office, you better have $500,000 in your pocket. When I started this out, I set my budget at $2,000. Time I was finished, I spent over $10,000.
Yeah.
So it's very expensive. I had the last 2 weeks. I had what to call a mailer, and it's just a flyer. It was about this big. I can send you a picture of it, but I sent 6,000 of those out, and I had to get a company to do that.
That's expensive.
That cost $4,100.
Yeah.
I had a full size billboard. It was run for 30 days. That was $3,000. I think it was 27 radio announcements, 30-second announcements. And every time that 30 seconds was $25. Which don't sound like a whole lot, but you take $25 for 30 seconds, and that's $7,000 or $800. I had text messages sent out. I had 4 different text messages sent to every cell phone in the 24151 zip code. So out of my money, I probably spent the last 2 weeks of the election, I probably spent $7,000. So you going back to somebody texting you. So I start. We had a little get together, and I guess you call it an after watch party at a local restaurant here in town. So we had probably about 20 people there, and I bought all of them dinner for helping me out and all this stuff. So we got the computer hooked up to a widescreen TV, and the restaurant had done closed, so they closed for us to come in, and we're there and we're watching. First precinct come in, I'm down by 20 votes. So next precinct comes in, I'm up by like 50 some votes. Well, the third precinct coming right before the third precinct come in, somebody there says, "Man, Channel 7 just declared you the winner." I'm like, "What?" They said, "Yeah, Channel 7's declaring you the winner." So we switched over and they had a little check beside my name and everything. Third precinct comes in and says 100% precincts reporting. 3 out of 3 precincts, William Ferguson, 719. My opponent, 697. So I'm won by 23, 24 votes, whatever. But then I had a couple of guys that was helping with the campaign. They said, "Just hold up. You still got all these early votes. We don't know where they went." So when the early votes came, I ended up losing like 78 votes. So we kind of did a postmortem on the election. And I think what happened was that I did not put enough emphasis on the early election. I did not realize how many people vote early. And in Franklin County, in my precinct, in my district, there was a little over 2,500 votes cast, and over 1,200 of them was cast as early votes.
Really?
So if I'd took that money I spent in the last 2 weeks and spent, half of it in September, and the other half at last 2 weeks, I think the outcome would have been different. Now I
Well,
was
what do
disappointed.
you think of early voting? Like I voted early one time because I was going to be out of town. Is probably that common thing as folks that travel for work or they're going to be out of the area? What do you
Well,
think that leans into? That's a 1,200.
no, that's been a big change. It used to be that's the only time you could vote early is if you was going to be unavailable on voting day. I'm traveling, I'm working, I can't get off, and it was a big form you had to fill out. But now early voting started September 19th, so you could have went to wherever your registrar is there in the county you live in. You could have went down and says, "Hey, I just want to vote early." Okay, here's a ballot. Vote. So it's just convenient. I voted early because I knew I was going to be working at polls. But a lot of people will vote early, and you can vote by mail. I foresee, and I talked to several people as to polls. I told them that they need to remember this because here's the Billy Ferguson hypothesis of elections. I think, and you'll appreciate this, but I think within the next 5 to 10 years, all your voting will be on computer. You will do it from your home. Because I think the technology is there. And I have people say, "Well, how do you do security on that?" Well, how do you do security if I vote and drop it in a mailbox? I mean, you can do that now. I can vote, take it to the mailbox, and drop it in.
And they say in Virginia's you got to request the ballot and you have to be verified, like they do a verification. Some states seems like they just manufacture ballots or whatever. There's some noise
And,
that
and,
goes on
and
with that. But I do know that about Virginia's that you have to request that if you want to vote by mail, it's a verification process that you can't get 15 votes and try to hand them out to all your buddies or fill a bunch of them out or whatever.
that is true. But how do you?
Yeah,
I mean,
how do you know the person that's filling it out? Yeah.
well, not only that is how do you know that when you dropped it in that mailbox, how the chain of evidence went after you dropped
Yeah.
it in that mailbox?
Yeah.
To me, there's bigger security on a computer than it is, and you can register on computer. A lot of people don't know this, but you can walk in and vote without being registered. You can register that day, and you don't have to have an ID. Virginia requires ID to vote, but you don't have to have it when you cast the vote. They call that a provisional ballot. So your vote does not count unless it's like a tie, and you have to prove where you at later on. But
Yeah.
that day, you can actually register to site. But anyway, it's a lot into it. I did not realize how many people that voted early.
Interesting.
I was disappointed, and I know this is kind of crazy to say, but I was disappointed, but I wasn't sad.
Yeah.
I think my whole fear through this whole election thing was that I'm going to get on there and I'm just going to be cream. This other guy's going to beat me by 1,000 votes. I'm going to have 250 and he's going to have 1,000. And it wasn't that way. And I will tell you, after I was telling you about Channel 7 declared me a winner, I started getting text from people saying, "Congratulations, way to go, man." I even got two from board members saying we're looking forward to working with you. So, and I've still got those too. I
Yeah,
count
that's
those.
right.
So, you know, and I'll tell you another little funny story here. Is afterwards, and it still happens sometimes when I run across some people. They're saying, "Are you going to do it again?" And I said, "Well, let me put it to you like this way: if you're asking me tonight, and I'm talking about election night, if I'm going to do it again, the answer is ain't no way in heck I'm going to do it again."
Yeah.
But ask me 2 years from now, I said it's kind of like the first time you ever got drunk. If you drink and you got drunk and you got sick, you swore for 2 weeks you ain't never gonna drink another drop. You ain't never gonna do it. But then in a couple of years, you forget how bad you felt, and you went and
Yeah.
do it. So I will tell you that all my signs I used are in my basement, all my banners I used are in my basement, and all my contacts I have listed. Who knows what 4 years now is going to bring? But the most thing I was proud of, Jeff, I ran against. So going into this, and I think we talked about this one night, I only had an 8% chance of winning because the
Really.
incumbent wins 92% of the time. So I was up against a two-term incumbent that had powerful endorsements from senators and House of Delegate members and had a lot more financial resources than I had and only lost with 78 votes. So I think that stands on says there ain't no shame in my game. I did well, and I'm
Yeah.
proud.
I knew you. I mean, I kind of, because I know you. I knew that you would be really excited that you had a strong showing. I know it wasn't the results that you wanted. I'm happy for the other guy. I'm not, but just listen, knowing you, in the way that it ended. If it had been different, you would have been. We'd be, folks would be having a whole different conversation about Billy's agenda and things he'd like to have done. But that's what kind of took me was like, I had shared with someone, I can't remember who it was. They were like, "Hey, did you see this?" And I go, "Yeah." I said, "But when you look at that, is 50 almost." If we say we'll probably easily say what 45, 46% of that community.
My opponent had 51.9%, and I think I had 47.90% of the vote. So that's what I was going to say. If there's a positive that comes out of this, you know, it was almost half of the people did not like my opponent,
He likes
or didn't
politics. They
like
say
what
he's a
he
bad
stood
guy.
for. They might have liked him as a person. I like him as a person. I don't like the way he represented and led our district, but I like him as a person. So I think that if there's a positive comes out of this is that maybe he's not as strong because he made a statement in a board meeting one day that beating me would be a cakewalk. And I don't think he got a cakewalk. And I got that. It was open mic, and I've got that captured on audio. And I
Really?
actually used that. Yeah, I used that in part of my campaign. That here's somebody that's conceited enough that I knew he called and reported some of my signs and got them taken down by Public Works. I
That's
had all this.
normal. That's the way I've been friends. Yeah, that's
He
fresh.
was bragging to somebody at a meeting, and there was an open mic. It caught him at that meeting, and somebody sent it to me
Really?
and stuff. Yeah. So anyway, I think it opened his eyes to see that maybe some of the ideas that I was putting out there were some things that were
Yeah,
positive.
that's what's maybe to help him. Maybe to help him. Maybe
Absolutely.
to help him some of his stuff. Right? I think it gives all of us the time to evaluate, and hopefully he
Yeah.
does the same thing.
Yeah. And
All
I
about
called him.
the thing we lose sight of, Billy, in these scenarios where it gets between Billy and your opponent and all. But ultimately, we're here to serve the people, and we just want to do what you're.
Absolutely.
I think when we look at that, is hopefully I think I'm really excited, and I hope you would. I hope, and I think it would for me, just knowing how I would be like, hey, I have to really take a hard look at things because I'm here to serve the people. Tommy, my friend Tommy down Pennsylvania County, is doing police work. He reminded me that he goes, you get on the job, Billy. I'm 100% guilty of this. I'm just griping about everything that I had to do or got to do, and just kind of having my own little pity party sometimes. And I heard him chewing somebody's butt on the phone one day, and I was like, "What's that all about?" And he said, he forgot what he's here for." And I was like, "What did he forget?" He goes, "He forgot he's here to help people." He says, "Sometimes when we start griping too much, we forget that our job is to help people." And I think that's something to be said there.
Yeah. And it was an enlightening experience. There's a whole lot of stuff that people don't realize about politics. Uh, so it was a learning. I'm glad I did it.
What was
like
your
I said, I'm
biggest
not
surprise?
mad.
Like, go back and say, man, if there's one thing that the biggest surprise I had was.
Probably the biggest surprise I had is that the community that I was to represent had no idea who their current representative was.
All right, so, dude,
Probably 90% of the people I knocked on the door, they didn't know. And I think what I found out was that unless you have an interest in politics, that they don't really care.
they
I mean,
read the
you know,
noise.
as
I
long as
was
it's not affecting their day, as long as it's not affecting their day, you know, uh, they didn't care. And I'll put that in mind of your world. You'd be surprised how many people out here in Franklin County where fire and EMS is predominantly volunteer, they think everybody out there is paid.
yeah, everybody's fake. Yep.
And you may come to Roanoke City and they think everybody's volunteer. They just don't know because they've never, 10% of the population will make 100% of the 911 calls. 90% of the people never call 911. And it's the same thing with politics. If you haven't, I go down twice a year, pay my taxes, and that's it. And I think that was the biggest takeaway of everything that surprised me. And the whole thing was they don't know who the representative is.
I was in a meeting and someone was explaining the political officers, like I think in a city, and a couple of people was like, "Well, what's our term limits?" And the lady's like, "We." And the room paused, and they're like, "Have we passed that yet?" And I was like, "No, there's no term limits." And the people, there was like half the room were like, "What do you mean there's no term limits?" And they were mind blown. I was like, "That's you guys. We scroll and talk about that on social media a lot, but it's never something that's put into action." And they just assumed because they saw it on social media that had to take hold because there was so much noise on it. And I
Let
was
me
with
add
you on
something
that.
to that.
How many people don't understand that?
Well, let me add something to you. On a local election, you can't have term limits in Virginia. Now, people will tell you that Rocky Mount has approved term limits, and the mayor can't be no more than 3 terms. Rocky Mount Town Council did, but it's not binding
The
because it
state
goes
didn't
back.
ratify that, did it?
No, it goes back to what we've talked about earlier on in times doing this. Is Virginia's a Dillon rule state, and right now term limits at the local election has never been approved by the General Assembly. So there's a lot of
That'll be something that will mushroom into. That is something really cool because you got to think Rocky Mount is the trendsetter. Little small Rocky Mount population 6,800, I think is what it was, Bill.
it's less than that. It's 4,090 the last
Yeah,
time I checked.
4,090.
4,090.
The Vernick Civic
Yeah,
Center would hold Rocky Mount.
twice, 3 times.
Yeah,
That is the one of my things was platform. I don't think that, and I think this is from the lowest elected official all the way to the president that there ought to be term limits. You ought not be able to get in there and make a career out of it. And that's one of the things I campaigned on. But if I'd have got in on that, then we'd have had to work with the General Assembly, do that. Now, there's lots of jurisdictions, and that's a hot topic, that's working with the General Assembly. But so far, they have not approved to allow localities to do that. Now, Roanoke City Council can come in and vote and say, hey, we want term limits all you want. But until the General Assembly approves that for Roanoke City, because remember, the Dillon rule state, you can only do what the General Assembly allows you to do.
yeah.
Where a home rule states, you can do anything that's not prohibited.
So let me, there's a couple things I want to put in. It's a good time to point into a little business here is your campaign finances. I teach the exact same thing with my business coaching side is get that separate bank account set up. So LLC, EIN, get that business banking established and the $100 that it costs you to run your EIN is kind of the only money that we owe back and forth. From then on out, fund that business account, get all your business money going into that and keep those expenses separate. Don't, because it just makes your end of the year accounting, all the things that we're going to try to do, you're itemizing your expenses, and like for you is reporting. So the parallel between what you did there in business is I absolutely preach all the time. The other thing I would tell you that you that kind of stuck yours on the Dillon rule thing was we talked about one of our episodes about taxes and we tax cigarettes. The General Assembly has given localities certain parameters on where they can add extra taxes. Case in point was like Roanoke City. I think it was Roanoke City a couple of weeks ago. They wanted to, why don't we have a $20,000 tax on vape shops? or some kind of astronomical number or some kind of fee, and that's what I was trying to explain to people. I'm like, yeah, they could do probably a license thing on the state level, but or on the locality level. But as far as being able to tax some of versus raising meals tax, all right, let's do this. Let's tax everybody wearing that every Under Armour sweatshirt that's sold in Roanoke, Virginia is going to have there's going to be a 2% additional tax on it. There's some localities outside of Virginia that do that to fund certain projects or what have you. That's not something that Roanoke City could do. They can't, there's only certain parameters, or in Virginia as a whole, there's only certain parameters that a locality can come in and add a tax that's not approved through the General Assembly.
And that's a home rule state. You got three types of states. You got home rule, Dillon rule, and you got a combination. And Virginia is a Dillon rule, and it's a very strict Dillon rule. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, and you might dig into this, you might already know, but I believe that Roanoke City was the first jurisdiction in the state that was allowed to do the bag tax, where they put the nickel on the plastic bags in the city of Roanoke. So if you went to like a convenience store in the city of Roanoke, you had to pay a nickel if you wanted a bag. And I think they were the first locality in Virginia that was approved that. But you're right. You can go to Greensboro, North Carolina, and a home rule state can do anything that's not prohibited by the state. In Virginia, you can only do what's allowed by the state. Up until just about 5 years ago, you could not have a cigarette tax in a county. You could have it in a city, but not in a county. But now you can, and you're spot on with that. And what you're saying is, and I get it. I don't know why I wasn't thinking that way. I understand why I needed to put that money, because now I'm having to do a lot of extra paperwork to close out my election stuff, which is not closed out yet, to show what money I spent and where I spent it.
I hope more people clean that up, Billy. So it's not. I don't want hate me trying to educate here in this little part of just telling our business owner friends or potential business owner friends so they can get ahead of it. That's a problem. It's not a problem. It's just something I help people clean up on a regular basis. Like Jeff, I've got my accounting's out of whack here. I've been moving. I got money here. I got money there. And then all I do is just help them kind of figure out the system, and then we got to help them figure out a system where we can get all that merged back into their most of the time it can deal with where they don't in this case on the business side they're trying to figure out how to pay themselves and they need that, or their cash flow is very strained, so they're infusing their own money, they just want to pay themselves back. That's generally can be a little bit of it, so it can be a little intimidating, especially when you're trying to figure it out and no one helps. Just it's one of those things that I don't mind helping navigate. Let me answer your other question. Ding ding. Virginia became the first locality in the state to adopt a tax on disposable plastic shopping bags. The council approved 5-cent tax in May of 2021, making it the pioneer under a 2020 state law allowing them. And then basically the law took effect in 22, and or the rest of the, like Fairfax, Arlington, and the Fredericksburg, Alexandria all jumped on board at that time. So you're spot
Yeah,
on with
so it
that,
looks
man.
like that, if it was approved in 2020, that localities could do that, and it was left up to the locality, and then they started doing it in 2022. I believe it was what you had said there, is the way it was.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Because it
2022 is when the tax took effect. Roanoke had already passed to be able to start accepting that in 21. But the other thing I think is unique when you look at Roanoke as well is I think we've talked about this. If not, I've shared it with some other folks. Where Roanoke is a nation leader in still in the opioid crisis. Like Roanoke has a lot of overdose deaths, and the opioid crisis that rolled through here in the early 2000s lives itself inside of Roanoke on a pretty regular basis. So they're always trying to figure out funding and different things along those lines as well. So that's why it's always kind of top of mind to me about what can be taxed and what's not too.
Well, ground zero for that was like Southwest Virginia and Kentucky, West Virginia,
Yeah,
that border
Grundy.
around the
Yeah, you get out in some of your yeah. My work took me out that way during those times. I was in a conversation earlier tonight with some folks that are they're still kind of embedded in working that. And so the lady was explaining to me her role as kind of as a crisis intervention person for the opioid addiction and kind of what we call a crisis, so to say. And I was like, oh, you know, speed, take your time machine back to 2000s. I could probably tell you when the first prescription opioid related death happened in Franklin County. It was on Juba Early Highway. I can tell you exactly where I was because Franklin County wasn't known for having opioid overdose deaths at the time. The team that I worked for was absolutely, you need to get ahead of this pretty quick. So I went to work, and I was sharing that with her tonight as well to talk about a little bit current, like an old event that still lingers in our community.
Absolutely. And like we talked about business leadership and lessons learned, that's some lessons learned that we can take forward and how we dealt with opioids and what you learned from that and where it did come from. But that the medical community, I think, was really the cause of that.
Yeah.
Because I remember working in the medical field, and that was one of the things. Somebody come in and complain of pain, number one thing is get rid of their pain.
Yep.
What's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? 9, oh my God, we got to get rid of that pain. And now, I think we've almost went too far the other way.
Yeah.
Because with doctors and stuff, it's tightened down so much. Like I said, I used to, you know me, I've had kidney stones forever. So it wasn't nothing to go into back 15 years ago. You go to the hospital and doctor for kidney stone, they'd write you 60 oxycodones with 2 refills.
Yeah.
I had open heart surgery 2 years ago and they sent me home with 30 with no refills. So you go get a wisdom tooth cut out to tell you to take Tylenol. So I think maybe the pendulum has swung too far the other way.
Or we built so much distrust and addiction. We built because we don't. There's that gauge of, are you really in pain? Or are you doctor shopping? Are you really in pain?
Yeah.
We have a day, and this I'm kind of dated on some of the stuff that's out there, but it used to be a database and some other things and ID requirements. We folks, we were Franklin was there was nothing for our rural pharmacies to be robbed or broke into in overnight B&Es for people trying to loot the any kind of opioids that was inside of there, to the point where they quit carrying them on site. Only certain pharmacies would carry those because of the ones that had the extra security. Some of your rural pharmacies basically quit carrying all that, and they would have signs on their door saying, "We don't carry this. Don't break into our place," type stuff.
Yeah, we had several instances in EMS where that the EMS folks would run a call, and they would be checking the patient's medicines, and then after they took the patient to the hospital, they'd go back and break in the house and take the opioids.
Yeah,
We had several of those cases that end up getting prosecuted for.
EMS workers were doing the break in, or
EMS workers, the same people took it to the hospital.
yeah, interesting.
We had several of those that were either volunteers or career staff here in Franklin County they'd go and see what medicine she was on, and then they'd either go back to the house and take them, or they'd take them, not turn them into the hospital. When you hand a bag of medicine over, we just so accidentally forgot to turn the oxycodone over.
Yeah.
And that happened everywhere. How many times did Roanoke City, Roanoke County have people diverting drugs? And you don't hear that as much anymore as you do, but there was a lot of that did. How did we get from elections to
talking about Dylan Rule, the taxes, the opioid crisis?
Yeah, Dylan Rule, yeah. Well, I'm glad you learned something on that right there, but you're spot on with that on the Dylan Rule as to how it affects. You just can't tax everybody, and people. It's like we talked about the difference in town and cities and counties. That's why you pay double taxes, because towns are not separate jurisdictions of the county. They are part of the county, where cities are not. They're separate jurisdictions.
Would you experience wise? So we talked about, we'll hit you with you're going to do it again. You kind of answered that one. I didn't get a chance to ask you that one. You kind of told that one, like, ask me in 2 years. Experience wise, Billy, if you were going to advise someone who was running based on your experience, like what's some of those, man, like you said, we know you would have focused on early voting. Is there, and, from an experience, because I remember when you announced it, you're like, man, I always wanted to run for office and I'm going to go do it. Folks, let me tell you something. I like that because it's one of those things that as far as we know, and I don't remember my past lives. I was probably pretty cool in those too, but I don't remember those. So I've got to experience what I need to experience in this life. And when you said that to me that day, you're like, I just want to do this. It's something I'd like to do. Try to live every day like it. Why'd you do that, Jeff? Because I ain't never done it. Just want to check a box on it. So like I said, I checked the box on it. Experience wise, when you're giving that advice to someone else, we know about the early voting, but like any other, would you say it was a good experience?
Yeah, it was a really good experience. I had some really good conversations. And if I had if somebody came to me and Jeff Roberts comes to me and says, I'm going to run for Roanoke City Council, give me one bit of advice. The advice is to knock on doors, not walk streets and knock on doors. You can get on the internet, you can get on social media, you can do mailers. You would be surprised of how many people. I knocked on over 1,500 doors. I made myself a promise I was going to knock on every door in the Rocky Mountain District. Well, I didn't realize how many doors it was, but there was very few days. I started knocking on doors August the 1st, and there's very few days that I did not knock on. And some days I might knock on 10, some days I might knock on 50, but knock on doors, and you get all kind of reactions. I would have people that say, hey, I appreciate you stopping by. You're the first person that ever knocked on my door. You got my vote. Some people would invite you in to sit down and talk. Some people would say, I don't vote. I had one guy say, I'll get my mother to vote for you, but I'm a convicted felon. I can't vote. Well, thank you for your honesty. We'll move on. But if I had to tell you one piece of advice is walk streets and knock on doors. You've got to have that personal connection, and it's different when you're sitting there looking somebody in the face, asking them to vote for you. And that would be now. There's other things that we could go to lessons learned. There's some things that you got to be really, really careful about how you say things.
Yeah.
Because that can get you in trouble real easy. I was careful never to use the word I promise. One thing I promised that I would tell people, I'm going to make you one promise, and that's to work for the people in the district. Can I promise you that I'm going to get you trash pickup? Absolutely not. I'm one vote out of 7, but sometimes you get caught up in that. And it's really, you would not, and maybe you would, but it was even careful how you, what you wore.
Yeah.
Where you went. I had people advising me, hey, you go in there, you wear a T-shirt. Make sure you don't wear a blue one because people will think you're a Democrat. Don't wear a red one because they'll think you're a Republican.
Yeah.
You've got to walk down the line. Hey, you need to be at this event. And I had a couple of advisors, and we'll talk about that offline sometime. But they would say, hey, you need to go. You can do this. You can do this. You go into this political forum. Well, right here's some sample questions that you got to ask. I went. It reminded me of the old Jeff Krasno commercial on TV. I actually went and met with some of my advisors, and they would act like the people asked me a question, and they would ask questions just like the thing was, and see how I would answer, and then they would say, "Oh, good day. Oh, well, don't say that. Right here's the problem if you say that."
Yeah.
And so. You had to bone up on that. It was almost like and it was debate planning, I guess. I had to go to, I was on a podcast. I was on a couple of them doing the election, but one of them I was on. The guy that was working with me says, I want you to take a notepad and I want you to write down every question that you think they're going to ask you. And then we're going to go over the answers on how to properly answer. I was told that the less you talk, the better off you are.
Mm-hmm.
Answer the question, answer truthfully, but don't expunge on it. Don't ramble. Don't get up there and talk 10 minutes. Ask your question, be concise, give them an answer, and move on to the next question. But one thing of advice: knock on doors. Just knock on doors.
Same thing in business is probably 5 to 10 times this week. Jeff, how can I get my business out there and find more customers? And how can I do this? I'm like, it's all about the relationships. I
Mhm.
preach relationships, relationships, relationships all the time. It is like you said, that one door you knocked on where they said, ain't nobody ever knocked on my door. I've been felt like I've left out of this county in this process this entire time. And because of your efforts, they become evangelical about the impact on you, and they go tell three friends who have never had their doors knocked on, and they're like, well, I'm voting for Billy too. And so that one relationship that you made there gave you in the business world would have basically generated four new customers for you, and they're telling their friends because of the impact they had on you. And that's the lifeline for a lot of businesses. Get that wrong because they build it, or the small, especially some of the guys who are starting out, like, I want to start a Facebook page, and I'm like, yeah, but nobody's gonna see it. We
Yeah.
got to give them a reason to go find that Facebook page. It used to be, Billy, when I first got into business, if you had a website, I got into business in 2007. If you had a website in 2007, you were kind of someone. If you fast forward or go back in time, if you had a website 2000, 2003 in that timeline, you were a pioneer in the web world. If you were selling online, you were absolutely a pioneer. Now, when everybody's like, Jeff, I'm gonna get my website, everybody will find me there. I'm like, that ship has sailed because everybody's
Yeah.
got a website. This is where we are able in the political process and in small business, same thing. This is where I like to say we get good at our inefficiencies. And inefficiencies is going to put those flyers in people's hands. It's dropping off those business cards. It's asking people like, hey, do you know three friends that could use my business? No different than you and your search and stuff. How about your podcasting experience? I think you did some stuff live in person, maybe?
I did some live stuff. I did several podcasts. One of them I didn't do real well on.
Yeah, why? Tell me. You're such a good talker. What happened?
I think the thing about it was the host of the podcast wanted to do all the talking, and being as a guest, uh, okay, you gonna ask me to explain the Dillon rule, and I'm gonna get 3 words out, and then you gonna come back and tell me all about the Dillon rule. Well, if you knew all about it, why are you asking me? And if
Right.
you want to get my opinion, and it was like that. It was me and my opponent, and it was 4 facilitators on the podcast, and each one of them had different opinions. And it was like after you're there 10 minutes, you're like, okay, this is a waste of time. Why I'm even here? So because they would tell you what their opinion would be. They got, and I'll give you an example. They got off on EMS. They did, it was my background, and they got to talking about, well, how the state shouldn't have anything to do with EMS. Well, that has nothing to do with the local election. It has nothing to do, and I can sit down and tell you why that is, but it's not why we're here to talk. And so I think that was that one. I was on another podcast where
Billy, don't take for
it
granted
was
they have their own points that they want to get out too, right? I understand. I'm 100% guilty of asking a question, getting 3 words out, and then me giving my thing. My wife one day was like, shut up and let your guests talk. And so now I'm like, very simple. When me and you get going, I'll interrupt you because I feel like I need to talk. But I'm like, ask a question, shut up, Jeff. My wife will, if she listens to an episode, or I even got friends that are like, dude, you talk too much. Be quiet. Let them talk. I have people police me on that because I don't want to be that guy, but because I understand this is your time in that case. So, but I understand that in some of those cases, I've been on podcasts before to where they want to give you their insight, and I think that's all right. It's just you just got to get used to, you got to know that where you're at with that. And I'm just, those never bother me when I'm on those. I just kind of go with it, and then after it's over, like, hey, it's good listening to you talk. Have a great day.
well, maybe I used the wrong word there. I guess there's I think that what you and I do, there's times for that back and forth. But when you've got me and you've got my opponent sitting here, the whole reason we're sitting here is to get our message out to the populace and get you to vote for us. You know, it's not here for you to get your message out because you're not running for the election. And that was from that was a learning experience for me. And from then on, anytime I'd done a podcast, I would have a talk with the whoever's asking me to do the podcast. I'm saying, look, I'll do this, and we can do it live, we can tape it, whatever. But here's some ground rules that we're going to go by. and nobody objected them. And I had some really good. I did one called Country Roots podcast, uh, which was very good. I think we could take questions live. The guy basically briefed me before we went on of what questions he was going to ask. Stuck with those questions. The guy probably didn't say, other than asking a question, he probably didn't say 20 words through the whole thing. I think that was very good.
Yeah.
There. We did do a forum, and that was really, that was great. They had everybody in Franklin County that was up for any office, from House of Delegates to Senate to school board. Everybody was there. And what they did was they put us all across the front of this room. It was probably 200 people there. And it was really done like the presidential election when they do their debates. And each candidate, they had questions that were for everybody. And then they had specific questions, like, for example, they may say, here's a question for the Rocky Mountain, the two people running for Rocky Mountain District. And then they would ask you a question. And then you had 2 minutes to answer that question. And then at the end, so each candidate got 4 questions. But at the end, they took questions back from the audience. So when you came in that day, they wrote down a question so they kind of took a break. And when you came in, they gave you a piece of paper. When they took a break, you turned that piece of paper in, and it had who you want to ask that question to and what is the question. I'll give you an example. Like, I got asked 3 questions on that, and one of them was, what would you do? You know Diamond Avenue. Diamond Avenue here's got over 100 houses. There's one way in, one way out because of a railroad, and they've been trying many years to get a second way of egress out of there. And they asked me, if you were elected, what would you do that the other boards for the last 30 years haven't done? What would you do to help these citizens get an ingress and egress other than the one way they've got? The second question they asked me was, with my time on the board, my time as director of public safety, how come I didn't have more minorities working for me? Which was pretty simple. Nobody applied. I mean, it's kind of like, look up here, everybody up here is white. There's no minorities up here. I can't hire what don't apply.
Yeah.
And I gave some examples of some minorities that we had hired. And then my third question went back to an incident that happened here in Franklin County. If Franklin County was accused of some type of wrongdoing, would you support them doing a self-investigation on themselves? And my answer is no.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like, if Roanoke City has a shooting, Roanoke City's not going to, an officer involved shooting, Roanoke City's not going to investigate that shooting, state police is. You don't investigate yourself, of course. Yeah, generally, yes.
Yeah.
But
I've seen it go different on some of that, yeah.
And some it does, but I think the larger you get, and sometimes it has to do with the police chief. I think the new police chief in Roanoke that they have now doesn't do that.
But it's just good practice to have oversight, Billy. It's just you don't why open up the can of worms for a conspiracy,
Those were the 3 from the audience question I had.
What'd you say on that diamond extension thing? What'd you say on that diamond extension thing? Connected to the
I told them that. I told them that I had been involved in that work, and that there had been a lot of challenges with that, and there had been attempts to make it. But I said the biggest challenge that I see is that I think it's going to happen because I think the town's going to annex some land. Actually, you can't say annex no more. It's boundary adjustments. But the biggest thing, Jeff, and I'll just be straight up honest with you, that you would have this groundswell from the community, and the county would be, man, we're going to do it, we're going to do it, we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And then the swell would kind of go down, and then it would just kind of go away till 3 years and go, people 3 years ago, y'all told us you was going to do this. Oh yeah, we got to get back on that. So then it'll swell up again. And I thought that, hey, that you just wasn't vocal enough. You got to voice your opinion and keep voice your opinion. Show up at every board meeting, look these board members in the eye and say, hey, why haven't you been out there getting this? Because, and I do think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen very soon. We came very close about 5 years ago, ran into some fair questions. We needed an easement through some property, and our selling point was the easement was going to be only for emergency vehicles, and the property owner was like, well, I can understand that, but how you going to police that? And we didn't have good answers for
You
that,
remember this for
other than
that,
saying,
yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, we can patrol through here and we can come through here every now and then, but I could come through here every hour for 23 hours, and I'm on 24 somebody's going to cut through there as a
Yeah.
shortcut. So
Billy, I
I
want
think
to
the
tell
main thing
you,
I said that.
I'll tell a Billy story here when you talk about the applying to minorities, because they won't get the application. And Billy, since I've been 15 years old, you've always been an advocate for getting people to apply, to the point where me and you was on that call one time, and they was chewing our butts about our response time.
I know
And
where this is going. Yeah.
yeah, and you said, and we had the lady up and whatever, and you were like, "You shut up," and because they were yelling at us, you like, you shut up," and you turned to the guy who was bad about our response time, and you said, "And if you feel like you can do any better, you put in an application." So you've always been in recruitment of all walks of life. So to your credit, man, I was 15 years old. Me and you was I was riding with you. Uh,
Hmm.
and you told them guys that, man, we've always told that story. We were
But
surrounded.
that's a challenge everywhere you go. I mean, you
We
can't
were
hire what's not a. You can't, yeah, you can't. Oh, I remember that. You can't apply. You can't hire what's not applying. And I think the organization ought to represent the demographics of the community. But I can't. You know, I mean, we would take applications. I mean, Jeff, the whole time I was director, we probably got. And I was director for 7 years or 6.5 years. We probably got applications for minority half a dozen times.
Yeah.
And all except maybe one of those, we hired those folks because they're well qualified. But, it's like you said, you're looking up here who's running. There was probably 10 of us sitting up there that night, and every one of them was older white males. There was
Yeah.
no females. There was no African Americans or people of color. There was no Asians.
Where they
It
do
was
that at?
older
Where'd y'all
white.
have that?
We did it. They do it different places. We did it. Typically, the ones they do here, they'll do it either Trinity Ecumenical Church or the
Okay.
Pig River Community Center, where we
Yeah.
were at. And it
Yeah.
was very well put together. Very
Yeah.
well put together.
Yeah. I remember the last one I sat in on that was at Ferrum College. They did one at Ferrum in the big auditorium
Yeah,
there.
yeah, they did it for us. You've been proud of them. I said they called us up to do it that night, and they had a podium which had to go up to it. The guy that was kind of facilitating it was a guy named Eric Anspall. And I was probably like halfway through when he called me up, and I got up there and I said, Eric, and I was looking around, I said, what's the deal? I thought I'd go and get some walk up music or something when I was coming up, and he said, well, he was going to play, what did he say? He was going to play Hail to the King. We didn't
Yeah.
think that would go over too well. But that broke the ice. Everybody cracked up. I think I'm a good communicator and a good talker, but I've always got
Yeah.
to
I
break that
agree.
ice. And it goes back to what I told you one time. I can talk in front of 10,000 people better than I can
That's
talk in
it.
front of
That's one of the
10.
comments I got from you on their podcast. It's like, what a great, like, they're like, Jeff, shut
Mhm.
up, let Billy talk more. Because folks really enjoy listening to just how you put your stuff together. You talk about walk up music. I spoke, and I was in a personal development conference for some work that I do last week, and we had an MC. I've MC'd, for me, I've MC'd the mayor's event here in Roanoke, ran some panels for them. I enjoy it. I love the, just based on my background, I like it when I can start helping people connect dots. And I try to be just as unscripted and raw as I can of pulling energy out of the audience on what I feel like they're looking for and what my panel's doing. So I'm just constantly trying to keep everyone engaged and be like, hey, write this down, remember this. And our MC was amazing. And when he introduced him, sometimes this event, man, it's not as energetic. This guy was just like, he brought the fire. And the last day, I texted the lady who I used to work with, great people, and went to AI and I created a walk up song for him. I'm like, listen, I had this big speaker down there they was using as a microphone speaker when we need it, and I was like, hey, you got that big speaker down there? Here's just create some walk up music for him. And they were like, so when I get downstairs, they're like, we want you to introduce it. So he had done this amazing job all week, and the last day, his walk off thing, I'm like, hey, come here. And he's like, what you got? And I had that speaker. I have my own walk up music for when I speak. So I was like, stand right here by the door. I got something special that we all put together for you. Just wait till I prompt you. And I hit my walk up music. And I walked in, we had this huge JBL speaker, Billy, one of those good ones. And everybody was like, "What the crap's going on?" And then it's like, "Listen, we part of this conference was when we introduce our MC is our MC has to have walk up music." And I did not realize that the job that this fellow was going to do for us all this week, and I have totally dropped the ball. So while you were all out having fun last night, I went to the recording studio and so I made him a song, and he came in dancing to his walk up music. So I'm with you. I absolutely believe in a little bit of setting the tone with some walk up music.
You got to do that. And you mentioned something there too, is when I'm out doing a presentation, the minute, there's always some nervousness, some anxiety when you step in front of the crowd. But the minute you start getting that two-way dialogue with the audience, it's game over.
Yeah.
You've got them in your hand once you get that going. And I always feel so comfortable. That first hour is kind of like, but if you get that icebreaker going, or you get, a funny joke, or even if it wasn't meant intentionally, you get that, once you get that coming back at you, it's
The relatability.
You've captured it.
Inability.
Yeah,
I love doing takeaways after it's like, hey, right. I try to create action items in all of my points. Like, hey, right. And when I was doing the mayor's thing, is the panel had said something, and I stopped and I said, "Get your pens out." What this person just said is y'all sitting out there like this is said every day. I said that's $100,000 worth of advice. Get your pen out and write that down, because it's a difference in word and taking action and not. So I try to drive home those little relatability points and add a little fire, a little motivation, because sometimes that's just what I like to do. And I've had really good feedback on, like you said, creating relatability in your stuff, and a few stories. And if you can get the audience to connect on their level, because Billy, most of your audience hasn't been the director of public safety. They never carried the little shovel that we used to keep on the truck to help us keep everything together when we needed to. So the relatability is speaking, is telling the story, and then saying, right here's what's going on in your life today. So like when I'm doing some motivational stuff and speaking and leadership, is I'll say, this is something that I did in doing it's time in my police work, but and this is where it left me. And most of you in this room's never experienced it, but I'll guarantee you have experienced X, X, and X. And then I'll start getting a head nod. Then we create that relatability between what you and I used to do to their everyday life. And like you're probably going home tired and not having clarity, and maybe not spending enough time with your spouse as you should be, and your kids sometimes don't know your name because you're working all the time. And so we create those relatable moments. It's good stuff. Let me ask you this. Well, what's next? You ran for this office. Like, do you see like a state, or do you think there's something potential? But like in your world is, all right, the election's done. What's next for Billy?
I think what's next is to keep the election in the back of my mind somewhere, and really think about it 2 to 3 years from now. But I think what I'd really like to do now is to get back and get my energy back on Ferguson safety solutions and move that forward. I've had I've really put that on the back burner for the last 3 months, but I had a call today, come out and do a bloodborne pathogen class next week. I've got a class scheduled out in Henrico County. I've got one down in Henry. So I've got some stuff going on up in Patrick County. So I think the other thing is to get back on some of the stuff that we have talked about earlier on, and to really, take a nose to the grindstone and really get that moving forward. Because I think we got a lot of good stuff out there. I think you and I go back a long ways, but I think we've reconnected, and through the podcast and through other conversations and stuff. So I think I went out to Site Reach and done some, met with them a couple of times. So I'm energized about that, made some connections there. And I think that things are looking good. It's just, I've got to get my nose back on the grindstone. And it's like I told you yesterday, we had a phone conversation. I had a guy reach out and want a pamphlet of the programs I teach. Well, I'd never created that pamphlet. If you'd call me up and say, "Hey, Billy, can you come teach a CPR class?" Well, yeah, we can do that. But this person wanted to, not as much as for them, but he had clients that he wanted to get it out to, saying, "Hey, here's what this guy can do. You may reach out to him." So I'm putting that together. I actually worked on that yesterday, and I'm gonna know what I did when I say I worked on it. I took my computer and typed up some stuff in a Word document, but I'm gonna get with you and we'll dress it up some and make it like a trifold and stuff like that.
What I would tell you, Billy,
So I think that's what's
I said all my thoughts, because you were excited, but man, I tell you, folks, and he's got one main story that we've worked on that is super impactful. It is absolutely one of the, uh, I think I know it's a national impact story. It definitely could be a worldwide story. I just haven't done that research, and I probably will because I'm curious, but you have that, and I had told you, like, sometimes with public safety, when we're done, is it's hard to move on. And I saw that calling back for you to, like, I'm gonna give us a check. That I'm back in my game, and because where we start going when you step out of that job, it becomes a little bit uncomfortable, and we're good at going back to what we know how to do. And for someone who didn't have that opportunity, and I had to figure it out, is I see so much other potential for your impact, and because you carry this, and you, along with a lot of our friends, the Pats all the Bryans, all the people we were talking about when we opened up this story, is we carry so much knowledge and a little bit of that business leadership and lessons learned. And for me, I'm not saying I'm happy you lost or whatever, but I'm absolutely excited because that didn't work out. But I'm out. I know that because I've seen the work. I know the stories. I know your impact that you had. I'm really excited for the this other side to come to life now, because it was all put on the back burner while you were running. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, if he wins this, that's probably going to live a little on the back burner because of the commitments because I know how you are. You're going to give 100% to make sure that you're doing that job. But I really feel like that because this didn't work out, your win is going to be felt and seen in what you're going to be able to do with some of your training and your workshops and leadership that you're going to put out there. So, man, I'm excited for that for where you're going to end up, and hopefully you and I will get to work together on some of those and sharing some of the same things. I wanted to tell you, I kind of revamped my leadership, and I've come up with some different things to really help tie in the stories and the setback, the comeback, all those cool things. And I encapsulated that, Billy, all into one word. And I have filed for a trademark on this term. It's called endodyne. And endo being that within the body, and dyne being that action and that power. You put those two words together, and in my leadership now is helping people discover that they have that power within them to be able to affect and lead and do and all the things that they do as well. I filed for a trademark on that the other week, and that's kind of where I'm going to set off to be able to mesh in all my public safety time, part of my business time, but layer in those struggles that old Jeff had, and this ultimate story of being able to live this amazing life that I get to. So that's kind of where I'm at with mine, dude. So I think when you get back on track with your stuff and on that, when the circus comes to town workshop, then the keynote that me and you've been working on, I think it's going to absolutely be a game changer, and it's going to impact the rest of our outside of Franklin County community. So I'm excited for the rest of the world to be able to experience all the things that you've done over the years.
Yeah, and I've got all the notes that we had, and it reached out to several other folks. I know we talked about having a small focus group, putting it together, so I've done that. Reflecting back to what you said earlier, without talking a lot about it, go back to the circus comes to town and get on Google, and you'll see that is not only a local state, but there's several British TV stations that
Yeah,
carried that story.
worldwide
To the
news, man.
UK that you can see that was a worldwide news, and I think that we do, and as part of the teaching I do down in Richmond, I've got an hour lecture that is just enough to get started, but it focuses on, are you ready? Are you ready today when you walk outside and CNN and Fox and Newsmax is all sitting outside? Not just your local WDBJ, but what happens when those are sitting outside? What happens when the BBC is sitting there? And you can't work this morning to do what Jeff does every day, but now something catastrophic has happened, and now Jeff has got to go out there and talk to these people. How do
The
you
microphone gets put
spin
in your
that into
face,
a policy?
right? Just like,
Yeah, it's right. And you're either gonna win or lose. If you don't say something, they're gonna go, well, "What you got to hide?"
yeah.
And if you don't
And
give me
it
a
goes back to
story,
like what we've said.
somebody down in
Everybody wants that
Ferguson,
opportunity, but not everybody can handle it. Everybody wants that. I can do that. Shoot,
that's
I
right.
watched Billy get up there and do that freaking thing. But then I'm tell you what, when the camera comes on, it's a different thing.
Yeah, it is a different thing, and you can just take that minor thing that you might not have had. You know, I'll give you an example here. The stuff that's it's maybe totally innocent that you might not never see, but when you do it in the right environment, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Can you imagine being out there that you're the business CEO, and something catastrophic has happened at your business, and here's all these cameras. They're interviewing you, and right in the middle of the interview, you do this. So to you, it's probably a habit just looking at your watch. To the people sitting at home, they're thinking, well, that dude don't care about my cousin just got killed. He just wanting this interview to hurry up and get on because he's got something else in his mind. He just little innocuous stuff like that can really, blow up. Yeah. There. It's how do you handle that stuff there? So I think we got a good program. I've worked on the I don't want to call it a book, but it's a pamphlet we've got to get out. The main thing I got to do now is get back on my flyers and put them together. And I got to kind of practice what I preach with sight reach. I got to be out and make some connections. Yeah. On my own to get that stuff back going. But I'm excited about that. And like you said, the election took some stuff away from that, but it seemed like it was the right time to do that. I'm glad I done it. Will I do it again? I don't know, but I can always check that box that I did it once.
There's something to be said for that, dude. Tell me, wrap us up on the Ferguson Safety Solutions. How can folks get in touch with you if they want all your OSHAs, your CPR?
The easiest way is you can call me, text me at 540-393-1703. You can email me at ferguson62@gmail.com. We are working on a web page and going to get that out there. We already have a URL for that. It's not up and going yet, but we'll be out there. But and you can also get me through Jeff with his contact information. Get me on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, on all those platforms. Even if it's just you just have a question, just give me a question. Just ask me a question. Ask me a question. I get you an answer. And I'm getting back on social media a lot to put a lot of that stuff out there we did before, like on LinkedIn and Facebook and word of mouth. I can give you. I sent three references out yesterday. Somebody called me, wanted some references for people I'd done class with, and sent them out yesterday. So yeah, give us a chance. Let's talk at least. If we can help you, we'll talk when, how, and prices at that time. But talking is free. So give us a call and let's see if we can help you. And if we can't, one of the other things, Jeff, I forgot to mention, I'm also back doing some expert testimony for attorneys.
Big one, Billy. Love it.
Actually working with I'm working with a Roanoke County attorney right now.
What you gonna be expert in?
Well, malpractice, negligence is all in the fire EMS law. Without saying a lot about it, the case I'm working on now is a EMS agency dropped a patient, and so I was paid to review the records. And that's how video is now. Everybody's got videos. So I got the video, and I had to write an opinion on, what was good, what was bad on this. And I just got the email yesterday that I got an invite to be in Roanoke County Circuit Court to testify to that. So
that'll make you a little money.
That. So I was certified by Roanoke County to be an expert witness, but basically just
big deal
stuff.
No,
I've done it before. I've done it before. Yeah, I've done it. This will be like the fourth case I've done.
But you're an expert. Like once you get listen, that's a bigger deal. Don't brush over that, because once you're qualified as in the state of Virginia as an expert witness, you're going to get, it's easy for you to get caught on because you're already qualified. You're just going to testify you're certified as an
Yeah.
expert witness in Roanoke County. I was qualified in federal court as a drug expert. So that's funny that I'm glad
Okay.
you brought that up, and I didn't really talk about it, but that's something that is I'm working on as well, is to kind of put myself out there for some case review for both sides. I don't, it's just, if you want somebody else to take an extra look at your evidence, I have this, like, I love cold cases and and some of the older stuff that's lived out there, but just as an extra set of eyes of someone that can come along, and whether it's homicides or, some kind of whatever that case might be, to where defense or prosecutors want an extra witness, is I've been working on some stuff to
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I forgot to say about that, but yeah, I've been working on that. And like I said, I just got the email. Matter of fact, yesterday, I believe it was yesterday.
go to LinkedIn and make sure you have, if there's a category for expert witness or something along those lines. But we should at least create a little bit of LinkedIn content for you about this, that who you are. Even if you go to LinkedIn and do a blog post on that, or just something that creates that, so when it becomes searchable when folks are looking for that expert, because you don't have an active website yourself yet, but as you do, we'll create content for that.
Right.
That's something you can publish on a LinkedIn blog or whatever. I can walk you through the steps to make that come to life, to where if there's other jurisdictions are looking for that, because that's ultimately you could find yourself all over the world testifying in cases along those lines, and at $250, $300 an hour probably.
Yeah, that's you right in the ballpark
Yeah.
on that right there. So yeah, we'll talk about that offline one day. But I've done it several times before and had some interesting experience on it. And this was kind of ironic. I get this call from my wife one day. It says, "Hey, do you know X?" And I'm like, "No, I ain't never heard tell of him." And she says, "Well, he says he's a lawyer and he wants to talk to you." She goes, "What's the law you want to talk to you about?" I'm like, "I don't know. I ain't never heard tell this guy." And she says, "Well, I told him you call him back." So I called him, and he says, "Hey, Billy, first of all, I'm going to apologize for calling your wife. I don't even know how I got her number, but I had it. And I just want to talk to you about this." So we made the connection there. And, I had to send him a resume and some credentials. The next thing you know, he says, "Hey, I need you to take a look at this stuff." And he sent me, paperwork that he had, affidavits had videos from certain cameras. And he says, "Hey, take a look at this, call me back in a week and tell me what you think." And I did. And he said, "Well, I need you to put that in a document for me. And I need you to fill out this paperwork to qualify as an expert." And then, like I said, just the other day, I got all that approved. And I got a thing here to go to court. I got 4 days, 2 in September, 2 in October, to be in Roanoke County Circuit Court, because it's two different. It's one incident, but it's going to be two different trials because there's two people involved in it, so they're not doing them together, doing them separate. So yeah, exciting stuff. Exciting stuff.
Well, it is. I mean, I think what you lean into, and we'll wrap it with this, is like you have that. It's another one of those things of that in your experience, and it's not trying to be negative toward it, but it's something to where you're allowed to, and you have that ability to come in and testify based on what you've done and your experiences and all those things, and what's acceptable inside of your scopes, and what somebody should be doing, and a reasonable person that under the particular amount of training, that's what you're going to testify to. Is just that side of it. So I think it's a really good use of another thing when I'm talking to public safety professionals trying to transition out of work is when I was exiting the task force, that was a big deal for me. As one of the attorneys, one of the friends that I was there, and I was like, I had never. All the agents had testified, and like our cases were generally so good, Billy, that we didn't have to testify a lot. The one opportunity that I was going to have was they pulled me in and let me walk through the process with one of the senior judges. And I don't think we even went to court, but they pulled me in and just said, hey, they asked me all the questions. Like, we want to get Mr. Robertson certified as an expert witness as part, because I was exiting my federal time and going back to my local time. And that's something I'd never experienced. So for me to go be 7 years of the work that I got to do, we didn't testify. We didn't have to do a lot of trial prep because our cases were generally open and shut. As we had you dead to rights in the things that we did. That was a big deal for me to get qualified as an expert witness in probably 2007, 2006 or so. 7 is when that was. Dude, folks, if you're listening, you need old Jeff, jeffreyrobertson.com. There's a little contact form there. You can drop me an email, or you can schedule time with me, and we can work through whatever your small business or coaching needs that you might have. So I'm available for any of your leadership trainings. You'll find me working in that leadership, AI, and marketing buckets is where I like to spend my time. It's where I feel like I've developed and got my expertise in, and then I layer in my public safety experience to help drive home some of those moments to help us turn some corners in our boardrooms. So look forward to it. For the other thing, I'll tell you, we're still finalizing it. As soon as Billy and I can iron out the details, we might try to jump on Thanksgiving Day to provide y'all with a little entertainment to jump into some of the current events that we didn't get to talk to tonight on just catching up on LA fires, New Orleans. There's some things that we had dropping off in the public safety and in the world that we both have been texting back and forth like, hey, this would be something good for us to chat about. We didn't get to that tonight. So me and him was just trying to see what we could do to jump in to give a little entertainment value for our public safety friends while they're on the job on Thanksgiving Day. So we'll keep you posted for that. And as soon as I get that scheduled, you'll see that pop up on our Facebook pages and our social medias. And if we can't get it working, we will reconvene after Thanksgiving to catch up with everyone. So thank you for tuning in to the Jeff Robertson Show. And I'm looking forward to the next time you and I can get together, Billy.
Hey, buddy, I appreciate it. We'll talk if tomorrow or next day. We'll talk and work out this other thing. And appreciate the opportunity and great show.